One of my favorite questions that I ask everybody is, imagine the you of today met the you of 3 years ago. What are 3 things you've learned that you'd like to teach the you of the past? And I have other questions like that where I can pull out some of these things. I want to see if they're humble enough to learn and make mistakes and be honest and vulnerable about those things.
And welcome everybody, and welcome back to another great episode of Product Team Success with me, Ross Webb.
And I'm your co-host, Henry Latham, and we've got a really exciting show for you today as we're joined by Jamie Mercer, a really inspiring product leader.
And Jamie's going to talk to us about some great discoveries she's made and the way she works with OKRs, especially from a top-down perspective. And as far as getting new understandings and forging shared understandings with your team.
That's right, Ross. And Jamie's also going to guide us through the adaptable nature of OKRs in a really nice, actionable way. So we're going to uncover, what to zero in on and how to actually apply OKRs, what's actually important when it comes to OKRs thinking, and even how we can take that OKR approach to coaching your product teams effectively.
And if that wasn't enough, Jamie's got some amazing background where she went into product management from being in management, and she's lived and worked in over 7 different countries and worked in so many different types of companies. And her insights are really, really insightful.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're also going to delve into a topic that's close to my heart when it comes to leadership. And that's the significance, some of these soft skills like humility, psychological safety, even how we leverage failure as stepping stones to help our team culture improve and ultimately deliver more results.
So strap in, listeners. I think this is going to be a really, really great episode with Jamie Mercer. I really hope you enjoy it. Let us know what you think afterwards. Let's dive in. Jamie, thanks so much for joining us today. It's really great to have you here. And Henry and I were talking previously about your journey in product's been really interesting, because a lot of people get into product and then they get really senior and then they end up in management and managing product teams, for example. Whereas you almost went the other way around, right? You went from management into product. I'd love to hear a little bit more about that journey and how it was for you.
Well, I had a career in management, MBA, and worked for some big corporates before I got into tech. But my tech career started at Retail Me Not, which was a global roll-up of coupon deal discount savings websites. We acquired a bunch of them and scaled that company into a successful unicorn. But my first role was sort of a generalist. There were 10 people. I was helping merchandise, marketing emails. I was running an ops team. I was actually managing accounts, our partner accounts, and helping get them to pay us more commission, et cetera, for the coupons we posted. And just this generalist role kind of gave me a lot of the skills and expertise to one day become a product manager, because I knew a little bit about everything. In that company, I eventually ended up doing a lot of optimization. So I was helping to operate the websites we'd acquired. And my CEO, the way I got into management, he was like, I found some ways to optimize the website. We could reposition the coupons a little bit differently, or we could improve this workflow. And he was like, get Jamie an intern, get Jamie another intern, get her another intern, because I could just show impact and we could throw people at the problem because we didn't have the tech. So that naturally led me over time to, well, first I built a merchandising team. So we managed all the content across all the websites and made sure we had the best deals and discounts and worked with partners to get everything posted and performing. But then it became a product role because we didn't have a big product team. So I stepped in and helped us build algorithms. I helped us build curation tools. I helped make sure our processes were optimized through technology. So it naturally led me into product. But the best thing was I had experience managing, leading people and growing performance. And I had expertise in many different areas across the business. So whenever I became a product manager, I understood what it was like to be a marketer, to be a customer support person, to manage accounts, and I could sort of speak their language. But it was a transition from running big teams to then going into product and being an individual contributor and not having a big team, but still needing to influence. But yeah, that's kind of how I got set up for product.
I think that's amazing because, a lot of people I speak to, and this podcast is aimed at, senior leadership in product. And a lot of people, I think a lot more junior, will say, I'm not that technical. I don't understand how microservices work, for example, APIs, and I really need to get more technical. And I've seen these more courses like how as a product manager you can get more technical. And I always push back against that. I always feel as a product manager, you need to become more, as you said, more of a generalist, but also veer more towards the sales and the marketing stuff. Because if your engineering team, I think, are good, and I'm not sure whether you as a product manager can, criticize it or judge that. But if they are good, and let's assume they are, is that really the best use of your time? So what I'd love to know is how that experience of managing all those teams helped you as you moved again from an IC, from an individual contributor, back to being a product leader again.
Yeah, I think it's really helped me. Well, number one, I have skill sets outside of product that I've run a part of the business or the company. So I think that's really helpful. I understand like trading metrics, I understand a lot of the different parts of the company. I like to hire people that have done something, that have been accountable for something as well, because they get another piece of business. They don't just have this sort of rose-tinted product purist mentality that sometimes trips us up. But I think it's really great with stakeholder management because I can empathize and connect to most people because I've sort of done the job. And also when I'm setting my product team up for success in a senior role, it helps that I can relate what we do in product to what they do in their role. And that's come in handy a lot.
I think it's a trend that I don't know if you both would agree, and I suspect you might, because I think all three of us sounds like we come from a non-product background. Or, is there a trend? There seems to be a trend, both within your own journey coming from management and that need to just say, okay, well, there's something that needs doing. Let me learn it. Let me try it out. Let me learn and improve as I do. And do you think that, as you say, those that are purists or maybe have started early on as product people, product in the title, that actually there's a tendency to put yourself in a box rather than say, no, I need to be a generalist, I need to be broad. And as you said, that affects your hiring process. I think that's such a good point, and maybe something that other product leaders can take on board is, let's maybe look for these other areas that are non-obvious potentially on somebody's CV.
I think above all, what I want to see in my team and the people I hire is that growth mindset and the ability to learn and develop. And that's my driving force behind all my career and life decisions. And I like getting out of my comfort zone. Like we were talking about before, I've lived and worked in 7 countries. And I love turning up to a new country where I don't know the language, don't know anybody, need to figure out how to survive, how to work. And it's same thing applies to my career. And, jumping into something, it's like a bit of naivete, a bit of false confidence sometimes to just jump into something I've never done before or learn a new skill. I know I love reading books I love being a novice at something and speaking to experts and figuring it out. And I look for the same in other people. Is like, as a product manager or product leader, you're going to always do something you've never done before. So how are you going to upskill and get better to do the job or solve the problem? Because a lot of our problems have not been thought through. It's particularly for your business. So you need to upskill with the challenge in front of you.
How does that impact your hiring process? So, a lot of people that are listening are either going through the process of hiring PMs or about to. When you say you're looking and for growth mindset, which I love, I think that's fantastic. Like, because people don't put that on their CV, although maybe they should. Like, I love Carol Dweck's book. I've read all of them. It's fantastic. Like, I believe I can drive a truck to Hawaii with pineapples. It's all good. But it's how do we, as a hiring manager, what tips or help to give people for both sides of the table? If you're a product manager that wants to get hired by Jamie or someone like Jamie, and as Jamie who's looking to hire product managers, how do you find out if someone really has got that growth mindset?
Well, I have my interview playbook and I go through product expertise, process, people, skills. But I reserve a lot of the interview for this sort of culture fit, growth mindset. One of my favorite questions that I ask everybody is, imagine the you of today met the you of 3 years ago. What are 3 things you've learned that you'd like to teach the you of the past? And I have other questions like that where I can pull out some of these things. I want to see if they're humble enough to learn and make mistakes and be honest and vulnerable about those things. So I just take that into every interview. And of course, through the interview process, I do behavioral interviewing where I unpack their background and I talk about products they've built. But I also say, what would you do differently? What'd you learn? What'd you get wrong? Because that's how we learn, is we make mistakes and we get better. But we need to be able to talk about it. And that's the kind of culture I want to have in the company where you work with me, is you can grow and get better that way and be honest.
Jamie, I'm going to have to steal that. I think that's fantastic, if you don't mind.
I have a set of 10 questions. I'll send you my favorites. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant. Jamie's favorite questions. Cool. Maybe we can put them in the show notes. But I love the fact of, if you were going to even ask the Ross of 5 years ago, because I think, as you said, you mentioned the word humility, and I don't think it comes up enough. There's a great song by Lonely Island, like I'm the number one on the humble list. I'm the humblest. But I think that kind of humility, that I remember, at a really large org, putting together a scorecard and getting product managers to kind of self-rate themselves. And we found like the more junior product managers would give themselves these really high scores. And the product managers that were the most senior were kind of the lowest. So it's almost like as you go forward, you realize, I just don't know anything. You're just making this up as we go along. So I don't know if that rings true in your experience.
Yeah, I think reflecting on your own performance and your team is really important to building a healthy culture. And I try to bring in the areas that I think make a great product manager. And it stems through from when I'm interviewing to when you're on the team, like what makes a great leader at your role, at the level of your role, and what I expect. And then reflect on how you get better and develop. And but also myself, like I do personal goal setting I do my own kind of OKR cycle where I set out objectives every quarter for myself. I actually have a notebook called like the best self planner, and this is where I track my personal OKRs and I decide what I need to get better at over the next 90 days and have a daily journal and 13-week goals, because I think it's so important to reflect and get better and get feedback on your performance.
I think it's a really good time to talk about team OKRs, and it'd be awesome to also come back and talk about the how you structure yourself, and then how that also translates to sort of that coaching aspect of product leadership. But with OKRs, I think particularly with our audience, usually people a bit more experienced, it's one of these things that everyone knows what they are right on paper, but in many cases it can be a bit vague, a little fluffy, and overly theoretical. So why don't we tee off with just seeing how you understand OKRs as a concept, and then we'll dig in then some really nice like concrete tips and tactics that you have about actually implementing these with your team. So what do you how do you define OKRs yourself?
Well, I think I try not to get lost in the OKR unto itself as a thing, but to me it's how do we cascade strategy and intention across the company so that people at the most senior level to the lower levels know what's important, why it's important, and how do we succeed. So I think it's important to have a way to set goals and hold people accountable and make people know what's the most important work we need done. So OKRs come in really handy to do that.
And are there any ways that you sort of maybe common mistakes? Is there ways that you question convention there? Because again, like everything in product, we've got the book, the sort of the predefined way of doing things, and then there's that the pragmatic real world. How does that actually work?
Yeah, I think what I've done, I can talk about example of going into a company and bringing in OKRs. I've done it a few times, but I think it's really important to set the context across the company into what they are. But before I even do that, is the strategy clear at the top most senior level? Is everyone bought into OKRs or into a strategic framework? So at one of my companies where I was CPO, we made sure the senior leadership team was incredibly aligned, and we used other tools. We used a book called Scaling Up, and we used a tool called the one-page strategic plan, where we spent 2 days at an offsite making sure it was very clear where we're heading, what our values are, I can go through it. There's a great PDF where it talks about the one-page strategic plan, but you work out like your 5-year goals, your 3-year capabilities, 1-year thrust, these kind of like, I probably mixed them up a little bit, but it was a way to get all on the same page as a senior leadership team, what you wanted to do. And then off the back of that, we could hang OKRs to break that down into a smaller increment and align around what are our 3 most important objectives, 3 to 5 most important objectives for the company. And then we could bring in things like, before you bring in OKRs, create a playbook where it's like a 1-2 page document where it explains what it is, how you're going to interpret OKRs. There's many different books, philosophies. What Matters by John Doerr is the one that it really speaks to me, and there's a really great website, whatmatters.com. So we'd roll out a playbook with how we're going to run it, how it's going to work. And also I encourage everybody to watch the 30-minute training videos that's on that website. So we all kind of speak the same language. We use the same methodology to talk about OKRs, but then you kind of have to tweak and adapt it to the company you're in and make sure it's serving the purpose, which is getting people aligned towards an outcome. Some things I've learned is like, I know everybody says this, don't do too many. I think it's important to figure out what's like a product health trading discussion, commercial performance, often separate from OKRs, because I've seen companies and fallen into the trap of trying to put every single goal. Everybody has to have one. Everyone's equally important, and you end up with thousands of key results, where it's really, in my opinion, it's really meant to drive focus, because strategy is about focus. And I like to make the OKRs really, really focused in on what's most important and leave the trading things, the health metrics check-in in a separate meeting. But yeah, those are kind of some of the things. Make sure you have a playbook, make sure you train everybody up, and then make sure that OKRs works for you, being able to adapt. Like, I've done 3-month OKRs, but I've also done 6 months, because the nature of the product we're building lent itself to longer cycles. I've done it within product and engineering, but I've also done it company-wide. And I think it's better to do it company-wide, but sometimes you need to start somewhere until you get that buy-in at a more senior level. So those are some of the things I've learned.
Yes, a lot of gold in there, which we'll come back and dig into, in fact. The word pragmatic comes to mind with like all of, your previous experience and then now as well. I mean, I'm sure impact as well is another key thing there, but you seem to be very good at just going, as I think great product leaders are, don't worry about the words and the buzzwords and the phrases. Just what is the intention of this thing, and how do we actually make that come through and then deliver impact in some way? So let's go back and look at that. Let's say, for example, you're a senior leader coming into, let's say, I don't know, a high-growth startup, a few hundred people there. How do you, let's say you don't have buy-in, because, I've had situations, and I teach many product people that say, okay, I've learned product strategy now, great, I get it, I get the nuances, defensibility, I get the nuance of focus, but I'll go speak to my CEO or CPO, and they just don't want to hear about it, because they're obviously under pressure, they've got investment targets, and it feels that the more we do, the less risky it in fact is, when it's the opposite. But anyway, so let's say they're not going to buy into a 2-day workshop. Like, what are the maybe sort of 3 to 5 key steps that you would take to build up to saying, yeah, actually we've got some sense of buy-in, we're able to now have a good conversation around what OKRs or which OKRs to set?
Yeah. What I like to, especially when I'm coming into a new company, I follow a 90-day plan always. First 90 days by Michael Watkins. Like, that's my Bible for a new role. And that allows me to have a structured plan on how to spend my time, how to spend the first 30 days not offering many opinions and really gathering that context, building those relationships, making sure I understand what's important. And then by the end of the first 60 days, I can reflect that back. And I really believe in written narrative, written strategy briefing, back briefing, the borrowing from the giants at Amazon and their PRFAQs and other strategies but I think I use written word and to reflect back what I learned from stakeholders and what I learned about the business and where I think we need to grow and get better or work. And I think by writing it down and getting maybe some things co-authored with some strategic partners or commercial people or sales, whatever stakeholders I'm working with is a good place to start. And then
sorry, Jamie, you use the word. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to dig into that point. You use the word reflect back. Do you mean in terms of, is that like, hey, I'm trying to basically pass back what I'm hearing, rather than saying, no, I think this is what we should do? And if so, what is the sort of value of that, do you think, for you as that, product leader coming into that kind of situation?
Yeah. I mean, strategy is often like, where are we now, where we want to go, and how we get there. So I want to make sure I'm reading where we are now and where we want to go. And I think that's what a good document, there's many formats you can use. And then we can work out, if we agree where we want to go and where we are, we can work out how we think we should get there and co-create that future together and play our part and test and learn, and then create OKRs in between to figure out, okay, we think this objective OKR set will help us get to the end goal. And I think just being transparent and inclusive in that process is important.
I love the fact you're talking about writing documents at Amazon, and if any of my other colleagues at Amazon are listening, they'll probably have the experience of having been in meetings where you discuss, we have to have the correct kind of Oxford commas and how the grammar needs to be, and so it does get very specific, but it's a fantastic exercise. I don't know if you've ever gone to the level of, your shared documents and every single line has got a line item, everyone comments and goes,
yeah.
On line 17, you said this word, which is an Amazon terms of weasel word, be more specific. And have you ever been through the experience of writing a 6-page document and having leadership pull apart your grammar? Whereas, I used to think I was fairly good as a native English speaker, and then I realized maybe not so much. But I think there's an interesting thing there. You said that there's also another podcast interview that we've done, which I'll link to in the show notes. And two things for the listeners that have come to mind. One is there's a great book on the first 90 days of what you should do in your role as a product manager. And we interviewed the author of that book, was fantastic. We also did a giveaway with a couple of books there, which was incredibly successful. Secondly, Henry is one of, he's got, I don't know if you've used Miro much, Jamie. Henry has got some of the best product templates in Miro. I think they're the top downloaded Miro templates, and I can say this,
Amazing.
So, but he's got some great product strategy things there, and maybe we can link to that as well in the show notes, Henry, because Henry's product strategy Miro documents are like, I think, a work of art. I mean, like I've seen Henry go from things like we would do proposals to actually like, hey, let's just
made at least in a few years.
Well, I don't know about that. It's still Miro, so like, but yeah, we can throw paint and soup against your Miro boards in the Louvre. But I love that. I think that's super exciting. From my perspective, what I like to do when I join and when I'm looking at a product and for the first 30, 60, 90 days is also start putting together an actual scorecard of the people. So it's kind of like, what are the inputs? And I'm not talking about product, like how is the product going to go better? How are we going to deliver quicker? And actually moving away from delivery and results and actually going, what are the inputs that this product team needs? And where do I think they're lacking? And it's usually like one of 4 areas, right? It's usually either around data, communication or prioritization, and then kind of partnerships with engineering or business, and then trying to create an actual scorecard for your teams, and then just keep measuring that and keep improving that over time. And I think it's got two interesting things that you mentioned is, and I'm not telling Jamie anything she doesn't know, but for some of the people listening, if you try and go to your senior leadership team or go to your CFO and go, hey, let's do I'm going to spend an afternoon and explain to you what product management is and frameworks and how it works, you'll never get the time. But if you go through and say, this is what our team is, this is, our product run book, and document that, or our product playbook, and this is our product scorecard and how we're going to have rubrics and metrics against them and improve them over the next quarter. always describe that almost like via osmosis. While you're in the leadership meetings quarterly and you're updating it, people start realizing this is the stuff that goes into products. Otherwise, they'll just always default back to delivery, because you could go, hey, the product team delivered everything on time this quarter. Wow, they're a fantastic product team. Or they were 2 weeks late. Wow, they're a terrible product team. Whereas it doesn't answer questions like, well, were they actually building the right thing? Doesn't matter if they were on time if they were building the wrong thing. So I love that. I love John Doerr's book, Measure What Matters, which is what you've referred to. Fantastic book. I just always feel like there's something that happens in parallel that most people forget, which is that, actually, how are our team going, and how do we measure that as a communication mechanism back to leadership, and also for your direct reports and their reports to understand why we're doing it and how's the team working, how's the team moving forward, so leadership understand it, so you just don't default back to things, which I personally love, like product ops. There's a whole big thing of product ops, but I think that product ops, if you haven't got that product team scorecard, I think you're missing 50% of what really needs to happen. But let's get back to you, Jamie. So the other thing that you spoke about is you've lived in 7 different countries, and I always describe a product manager. It's kind of like a fulcrum or a translation piece. It's a translation layer that has to speak finance, the language of finance. Has to speak. You're an MBA like myself. You have to understand. I know a little bit about risk management, so you can talk to CFOs. You need to understand sales and marketing, etc. Do you think that what do you think is the future of product management going forward? Do you think it's going to become more engineering focused, more generalist focused, like yourself?
There's so many flavors of product management and the type of leaders you hire, and I think it's unique to every company and what they need. And I think it's like, if I think like when I build my leadership team or a CEO, you need to complement your own skills and build the right leadership team to drive growth or build and the company you're in. And so I think I do like to see, and what I've tried to bring into the organizations where I'm a product leader is that sort of business ownership, end-to-end product leadership, where it's not delivery or product ownership. It's the job's done when the outcome and the impact is had, and so often we'll create business units or hire people that have more of an MBA, a consulting or strategic background, to kind of, if the company needs them to, take on a bigger, more leadership role. And it was very common in my background in the States to have product leadership position that way. So I do see that as a trend. But I also think, some companies just need great technical leadership to drive the growth, and you need a real strong technical person in the driver's seat. It just depends on the company.
Sure. I'd like to ask a question to Henry quickly. Henry, you've taken so many people in your course, where you've actually made them have real world experience and actually going and talking to people. How have you seen that impact their product career going forward?
Yeah, well, I think it depends. I mean, generally we're focused on product strategy. I think there tends to be quite a large gap around that. We're looking at sort of PMs going to the next stage. But I really wanted to dig in and marry both of your points around, so Ross, around the scorecard and how you measure product managers, and how you ultimately not only sell that to stakeholders, but help develop them in terms of individuals, but also team players that are going to deliver impact. And Jamie, just coming back to your personal systems, for example, around like your personal OKRs, do you tend to take what you do yourself in terms of like self-management and apply that in terms of like the development of the individuals, helping them set personal OKRs? For example, do you just try and stay at team level?
Yeah, I see a major part of my role as a coach and helping people get better and figure out where they need to grow and develop, and also how I help them build better products and do their jobs. So I try to coach and reflect back to people a lot of the things I've talked about, and we implement. I kind of do. I don't love a lot of performance management, but I do like continuous coaching, continuous performance, and getting better.
Okay.
And if some structure will help them get there, I try to leverage that, but not try to force everybody into the way I do things.
Which is, again, a thread right across everything you do, which is awesome. I think that pragmatic, which annoyingly usually comes with experience, right? It's like, okay, we'll take a framework, see what works, does it work in this context, and then adapt it. But let's say you are giving, let's say, again, somebody who's maybe new to coach, you're not that comfortable as a manager and a leader. Like, what would you suggest as a good way to come in and sort of set nice, personal, more structured objectives and key results? With let's say a new team, or even an existing team, they're listening to this and they're going, hey, I want to put this into action.
Yeah.
What do you suggest they do?
Well, I try to make it clear, like, the expectations and the skill sets of a great product leader. I've used different ones in different companies to show what I think are the competencies of a great leader, a great product leader, and then what level you are. If you're a head of or a VP versus like associate, I have different expectations, different levels of ownership, and expertise. And I try to make it clear where they're great, focusing on what they're great on. I really like that rather than just over egging their weaknesses. But yeah, just working on like, what are you going to do differently? How do we coach? How do I make sure you're using your growth mindset? There's lots of books I recommend to help people grow and develop and kind of build that growth mindset.
Ross, how are you getting in? You're very experienced yourself at Amazon and before, particularly in this sort of management coaching role. How do you?
Well, I love the way you do it, Henry. I mean, this isn't about. I know this isn't about you, but I love the way that you take people and you actually make them build a product. I've had, I guess, on the junior level, loads of people reach out to me over the years, going like, "How do you get into product?" And my answer is always, "Go and build a product." Which, and I don't mean that in a glib way. I mean, it could sound glib because it's like, well, how do you build a product? What kind of product? And usually at that point, I refer them over to Henry because I haven't got time to do that. But I love what you're saying. You have to do that. Like, I'm sure Jamie would say, like, Jamie and I are not going to see the CVs of people applying for roles if they have no product experience, right? If we're talking to recruiters or whether internal or external, we would have spoken to people that even, as Jamie said, on the associate level, they might only have 12 months, whatever, of experience in product management, but we're not really going to be seeing the people who haven't come into that. But I think it's really clear when you get into the interview process, you start asking them, what are the challenges that they've gone through in their product management career? I love Jamie's question earlier. I'm going to have to steal that in future, but because it's always like, what would you have done differently? And obviously in a job interview, you want to put yourself in a positive light. There's nothing wrong with that. But to me, it's more a question of, hey, you're going to, and it's around the soft skills. You have come across someone who's just stickly and challenging and difficult to work with. And I'm trying to be very polite here. And we all know people like that. What do you do when you go to them and you start talking about product and they say, don't care, not interested, just tell me when you're done. I don't want to go through the whole rigmarole knowing all these things. And to me, it's like, if people have never been through that experience, that's a relatively big flag, depending on the seniority. It might be if it's a 6 month into an associate product manager and they've never been through it, it's kind of forgivable. If they're a senior PM with, let's say, 2, 3, 5 years experience and they've never had really challenging people who've just said to them, don't care, not interested, get out of my office, whatever. It's because you can't fire them. You can't, pull them in front of their managers and criticize them for that. It's what do you do when you come across those really hard, not just hard people, but those hard experiences where things aren't going to work. And you're going to come across, and I think you mentioned something on LinkedIn the other day, or someone did, was, they were talking to a product manager who said, well, what happens if I have to make a decision and it's not a data-based decision? It's like, it's never a data-based decision. It's always the people talking about, your product intuition. I think when you've been doing it long enough, it's like, product data it should inform, it should help, but there's always going to be that intuitive part, which means there's a good chance you're going to be wrong. and then it comes back to cultural things. What happens when you're wrong? Well, you're going to get fired. Is it going to how much? And people want to say you don't fail. You learn, and that's accurate. But it's only accurate and useful. Well, it's always accurate, but it's only useful in the confines of the culture of the company that you're working in. So, Jamie, I see you nodding. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think your point about, being able to have that psychological safety is another important thing to building a culture where it's okay to fail, get things wrong, be honest with each other. And for me, I think building strong nuclear teams, like your immediate team, so at my level and my direct reports or their level, is so, so powerful, because I think people who have that trust with their team or your squad, they perform better, they stick around. It creates this culture of transparency. I like to think that my direct reports and me, we can call each other out, we can be vulnerable, we can admit we're wrong, we can make mistakes. And I think you need to have that to get better and build a good culture. So focusing on this team and psychological safety and support and making it, I try to make sure everybody can feedback, give me 360 feedback. How can I do better? Listen to them is an important complement to what you're saying, Ross, because you have to create that safety that people aren't going to be raked over the coals if they make a mistake. Like, that's life, right? That's how we get better. That's how we go quickly.
100%. I just want to add one more point. I remember I was the director of products at Just Eat, for people who are outside of the UK or outside of Europe and Canada. It's one of the world's largest delivery services, like Deliveroo or Grubhub in America. And the one thing that was very clear to my team, which was I think 194 people, no one had ever delivered takeaway food, right? Or no one had ever been at when I was at university, I put myself to university delivering pizzas type of thing. So, and this was a long time. This was when I had hair like Henry, right? So it was a hell of a long time ago. But I got, our team, some of them had flown in from Canada and Germany. And I remember spending time, and we actually went and delivered. Some of us stayed in the central hub where we could see on the actual software where people were driving and, how things are working. So we got it from both sides, right? But only until you've waited, I think, at McDonald's for 45 minutes for a burger, and then the first one doesn't work because it's cold, and now you can't deliver, and then the other one, and it's got to happen again. Then you realize, okay, our product isn't as great as we think it is. And once you've been on those bicycles and driven through central London, I think this was in Kennington or something, and I think that added so much. And I realized not every single product's like that. I think, Henry, your wife's got a fantastic dog food product, and I'm mentioning that because Jamie's at a kind of a related type of organ. I remember once I bought that for my dog and got my dog eating it and loving it and going through the different things. I was like, okay, cool. Now I really get that. So it's not always possible to be that tangible. Some products are pretty digital and a little bit more abstract than being able to deliver McDonald's or pizzas. But I think that's one thing as a product leader I'd love I love doing, and I'd love to get your thoughts on that, Jamie.
I think, well, right now I work in veterinary care and pet apps, and I choose companies honestly because I want to make sure I'm building a product that I'm passionate about, that I can connect with our customers. And I think going back to OKRs or strategy or anything, always framing things in terms of the customer or the client or the patient, in my case, it just builds a lot of bridges. One thing that me and the veterinarians I work with and the nurses I work with right now is we all want to help our pet owners. Anybody who walks into our clinics, we want to take care of them. We want to look after their pets. So if I can tell my story in the product strategy or our one-page strategic plan or whatever in terms of how we're helping make the lives of our clinics better or helping our pet owners feel confident or our pets live longer, I think that's another good way to align everybody to complement what you're saying, Ross.
100%. And what a lovely point to end the podcast. Let's all get our pets and everybody else to live longer. I can't think of any better thing to think about. Jamie, it's been an absolute pleasure having you here today. I really, really enjoyed it. Jamie, if people want to reach out to you or find out a little bit more about you, or maybe we can put in the show notes those 10 questions, Jamie's 10 questions, I think that you mentioned. Are you okay if people reach out to you on LinkedIn and say hi or ask you some questions?
It's I think / Jamie Mercer on LinkedIn. Also Twitter, Mercer Jamie. So yeah, I'd love to hear from people.
Fantastic. Jamie, it's been really wonderful having you here today. Henry, is there anything else you'd like to say?
No, I loved that. I think just concluding point, I think this theme of pragmatism is something that every product leader should have, and just, adapt to the environment, and that's how you're going to help everyone around you thrive. And I think it's really inspiring to listen to.
Cheers. Thanks, Henry. Thanks, Ross. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Fantastic. And thanks everybody for watching or listening to Product Team Success today, and see or hear you next time. Bye for now.